Hello, RantBox TV watchers. It is once again a Friday transmission regarding various different topics. Today, our central theme will be the post-Trump world. Obviously, he's still in office till 2021, but I've gathered a couple of people who actually have quite a few things to say about our president-elect, Mr. Biden. When I say our president-elect, obviously not ours as in England where this is transmitting from, but for all intents and purposes, the leader of the free world is now Biden and not Trump. And so I'm going to ask a question, and for anybody to answer would be good. My question would be, now that we have the situation of Trump not being president-elect, what do we think about the chances of him actually deciding to leave the White House, as in not being asked presently by some kind of law enforcement? Anyone?
Forcibly or voluntarily? Because I think it's going to be a different answer depending.
Indeed. But yeah, I'm going to say, do you think that there's a chance that he will be having to be evicted forcefully?
Oh, that would be so much fun. Now, I mean, it's like Joe Biden said, the FBI is very good at escorting unauthorized personnel from the White House. So, he can sit there, he can make his little temper tantrum-y, whatever wank stuff he wants to do. But I think in the end of the day, we got this system in place, and, I think he's going to have to face reality at some stage and leave. He's too inept and narcissistic to actually do a coup as well. And he's not a fighter. The interesting thing about Trump is his foreign policy has been actually not as bad as other presidents. He's not into conflicts and getting people into conflicts. That's probably his only redeeming factor. So I can't see him really managing a coup or anything like that. I think it's just what will happen is he will try and do as much havoc as possible while he is in power, signing executive orders, bringing in personnel. What Joe Biden is having now is he doesn't have the intelligence briefings because Trump hasn't accepted or whatever. So he doesn't have the information he needs to take over office. So what's going to happen is, Biden's going to come in the dark almost, in a pandemic and all this kind of stuff. So I think that's the most Trump can do. Okay, I'm going to stop.
I just want to open it up to the room, because when Ola was saying that Trump is not into conflict, I, for one, would say that his whole career has been colored with conflict.
Wait. No. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about foreign policy.
Right.
I'm not talking about his combative nature. I'm talking about conflict he is not somebody who wanted to get troops going into places where they don't want. He's saber rattled, but he's not done in Iraq. He hasn't, he's not that kind of, he's not into bringing people into, okay. You got it.
Yeah, fair enough. Anybody have anything to say about those topics?
No, I don't think that is the case. I think the sort of conflicts and the way sort of America works is much more complex than what the president does. The troops are actually more than before. And also he did something really dangerous. Basically, he decided to unilaterally go against Iran by killing a general. And getting out of unilaterally from an agreement that was international. The point is that we say he didn't do any conflict. There were conflicts, first of all, they carry on, unfortunately. And the conflict that we are in is called the long war, right? It's not the war in Iraq or in Afghanistan. It's called the long war. Why? Because it's about taking back all the positions that used to be under the Soviet Union. So Libya, Iraq, Syria, they were all kind of like the surrounding of the Soviet Union have been taken back really aggressively with the speed of light. The question is what's next? It's not Iran. Iran can't be taken, otherwise it would have been taken in the 70s. Iran is too big of a mouthful. And so what's happened, I think, in this period is that it's a transitional period. It's a transitional period, and Hillary Clinton would have the same issues. The main difference is that America tends to do one thing. They tend to sort of like trying to block emerging superpower and in regional conflicts. And every time that America had a go at Russia, they kind of sort of like gave the sugar to Iran and vice versa, because America cannot front two important conflicts at the same time. So what we've seen, basically, we've seen a switch. Russia good, Iran bad. So now it's going to be Iran good, Russia bad again. And this is just two different views of achieving the same results from America. And I don't think that, so more than sort of like Trump in terms of foreign policy, I would say, look at the game of the Republicans in foreign policy, which is different from the Democratic one. The Republican tends to listen more to the Pentagon and less to CIA. The Democrats instead try to sort of like go more in a political, changing regimes and everything. Is a different approach, but the results at the top are still the same. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, presidents don't count a lot into kind of sort of like geopolitics and things like that. The main reason that to create a conflict, it takes about 20 years. So by the time you have a conflict, it was done 20 years before. It was analyzed and everything, so on. So basically, back to the other game. Russia bad, Iran good. That's what I see. Of course, with the long game of China, but that is something that we'll see probably in a decade or something like that. So in this stage, whoever is the president, what would be the next conflict? Well, there's no next conflict. Everything has been taken out.
Wouldn't you say that the conflict is going to become a lot more domestic in terms of the actual, say, heated debates about, say, the police?
But again, this is like, and I know please don't get me wrong, because I despise Trump. But again, all the issues that we've seen, sort of like the falling apart of the system and everything, the troubles with Mexico and everything, there is something that we're already in the map. Like I'm a fanatic of George Friedman, which is probably the biggest geopolitician in America. And the problem with America is that you can't attack America because there's the oceans and they control 90% of the seas. So it doesn't matter really what you just can't attack them. They can do whatever they want. You can't touch them, but they are very sensitive to regional issues. And the only regional issues they have is Mexico. But not because the crap that Trump said about the rapists and everything. That's bullshit. The problem is the other way around. Is Mexico is becoming extremely powerful. He's got plenty of resources, and he's already embedded in California. I mean, California, every town in California, Sacramento, Los Angeles, is there, And the fear of America is that California is going to say bye-bye, because California cannot function without Mexico and vice versa. They're just embedded one into the other. That's the big fear. So the wall is not to stop the rapists and all the crap and the drugs. The wall is to try not to have Mexico buying into California. And there's plenty of stories. There is the Politician, which is a sort of like it's a nice Netflix series with Gwyneth Paltrow, I never can pronounce the name, where, hypothetically, she wants to go off with California as a politician. And, sometimes in movies and stories, you see a bit of the future, that's the biggest fear. And that is what may happen. But this is regardless of Trump. With Trump, everything that happened with Trump, whether it's China and everything, it just looks shit because he's a terrible actor, he's a terrible interpreter of the reality. But the reality is there. And that's
okay, thank you.
Wasn't a lot of kind of the south of the United States, or at least the southwest, like historically, isn't that basically all Mexico though anyway?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'd like to hear more. I'd like to hear more from people who haven't had a moment to speak yet. Art, Ollie, anything to say on what's been said so far?
I think going back to Trump himself, and we were talking about his acting or not acting in terms of foreign conflicts and so on. I think so much of that comes down to perception. As Alfredo was saying, like what he does doesn't make much of a difference in the long run, but in the short term, people's perception changes and the public's perception gearing towards war or not war changes. But for him, every time I see Trump, I see a small town solicitor or lawyer, for the Americans of the audience, who's arguing over his neighbor's fence. That's what I see every time. I see this guy who's like, he's perfectly fine to litigate you into the ground. He holds the threat of inconvenience over your head, but never actually does anything to follow it up. You know, to take the allegory to extremes, it's like, if he can argue over the garden fence for years and years and years, but if you take a baseball bat to his car, he's going to go away. And that always seems the case with Trump. He's just one step away from chickening out.
Can I just say something? Can I just say, I'd hate to have him as my neighbor.
Yeah.
God, yeah. I mean,
I'm just imagining, what was that show, Home Improvement, where the neighbors always, and there's just like Trump's eyes kind of through the...
Oh, wow.
Art, you spent a significant amount of your life in America. What would you have to say regarding a post-Trump White House?
Indeed, yeah. I'm very interested in your feelings about California having trouble with independence, Alfred. I am from California originally. But staying with Trump, yeah, I think you're right. I see him as a used car salesman, but I love your metaphor about the garden. That's great. And I think that's the thing. He'll do anything to keep the attention on him. You know, that's what he's good at. He's a TV guy. You know, he's self-promotion. Today I had a revelation. Trump really is, I think what he may be trying to do, we know he has these legal problems and he may end up in prison. I think he's trying to portray himself as the underdog, like for instance, Venezuela, where you got Mercado, the leader who actually had an election, and Guido, who claims he's the president. I think Trump sees himself as this guy who's going to claim that he's like a political opponent. And if they try to put him in prison in the next few years, he's going to say, see, he's imprisoning his political opponents.
Yeah.
He's going to get his TV network, and he's going to keep his, some type of big TV presence. I think, and he'll be aiming for 2024.
Yeah, I find that he has this unique ability to convince enough of the electorate, at least the first time round, that he is the everyman, despite how much money he has. And he has this strange ability to suggest that he's been wronged, and so therefore people should get his back. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Rob, is there anything you want to add? Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a really, 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 really interesting point, Art. You know, I wonder if it's not kind of even potentially, positioning himself to be granted asylum somewhere, and having like a significant amount of the US population kind of supporting him, kind of almost even, sort of a slightly Julian Assange kind of thing, where there's this whole movement towards kind of, without getting into that or the facts of that, like there is a large movement to say that, what's happened to Julian Assange has been unfair, and people cheering the fact that he's been kind of granted asylum or was granted asylum within an embassy. I don't know, wouldn't it be kind of one of the most dramatic things that he could do if like Russia granted him asylum? Can you just imagine both sides exploding over this?
Yeah.
Rob, can I interject, Rob? Because I want to take what can Trump do? And you're thinking about extraditing. Maybe he'll go somewhere else. I'm more concerned about his rallies. That's scary. He's very different from like other presidential candidates because he's like a Hitler. He turns up in some bumblefuck place in America where all these really mutant looking people come out and probably spread COVID around or whatever. And they're just sitting there listening to him. And that's where I worry about a post. Yeah, exactly. And I'm worried that like, that's where he's going to be a real sore point in America. He's just going to turn up and do his rallies, not leave the country, not go and have Russia put him up. I actually think, he'll just turn up in, North Carolina or Alabama or wherever these places are that, where these people are, and just go, yeah. And that's more disturbing to me. And I wonder if Joe Biden, I just have this post-apocalyptic world where Joe Biden has to outlaw his rallies. I just see this kind of coming. Okay, yeah.
Those people have a lot of guns too.
Yeah, exactly. Like the ones that surrounded Biden's bus, those great types. But unfortunately, a lot of his people are old and fat and dumb. So they're not the youth movement of Black Lives Matter, okay? It's like your grandpa.
If I may interject, so there's one thing which we haven't actually quite brought up yet, which I'm surprised about, which is the fact that the president is allowed to pardon people. And historically, it's been used to pardon Nixon from the next guy. I forget off the top of my head who it was, but very much within the ball court that Trump could just pardon himself.
No, he can't do that, apparently.
It was Truman.
Truman, thank you.
I heard that.
Oh, no, Ford. My bad.
I want to interject about the pardoning. This is an interesting one that you brought up, Oliver. I've been reading nonstop and consuming way too much stuff, but apparently he could pardon himself, but it's only for federal crimes. Right. So when the District of New York goes for his tax returns, he can't pardon himself. So he can actually pardon himself but not for, like, if a state goes after him. And he can't pardon himself against Stormy Daniels either. I think that's a civil case.
If possible, can we, because we're running out of time quite fast, can we move the debate or discussion about Trump and move it a little bit along to say how we feel about Biden and Kamala Harris in terms of how they're being presented in the media and social media and the reality that may not be on display? Does anyone have any heated thoughts about this?
Can I kind of say something leading into that?
Sure.
But also kind of one foot in the previous topic, which is just, does any of it really matter now that the Supreme Court is stacked? Does it really necessarily matter that much that Biden is now president?
It depends on what happens with the Senate runoff race.
Yeah.
Because if he wins, if those two races in Georgia go his way, he will have infinitely more power than he does if the Senate is controlled by Mitch McConnell again.
Yeah.
So, and he could technically, there's a thing about stacking the courts. They could expand it's been done in the past, right. And they can expand the courts and bring in a more, more people in to even out the conservative edge.
Cool.
Okay, we technically have 15 minutes, so I have to be bastard moderator and move us on to that other thing. Does anyone have anything to say about Harris and Biden?
One thing I was going to say, if you were asked for inflammatory comments, was just the fact of Biden is sort of pasted as sort of like vanilla milk toast with this scary progressive woman behind him waiting to jump in and ruin everything and turn us into Venezuela. But the irony to me is the fact that it's probably the other way around, and that Biden is the guy who's pretending to be the upstanding guy who's actually got a lot of ideals, and Harris is probably a little bit more reserved, actually, given a lot of her sort of reading up about her and her history and in judiciary and things like that. You think actually she's pretty centre, despite what she initially ran on as a sort of presidential platform, which is interesting. So maybe it's going to be backwards. I don't know. I think
we should also consider the actual parties themselves, because obviously there's obviously it's very easy to sort of like to follow this interesting cult of these personalities and everything. I think Biden has been also chosen by the Republicans. This is a complete speculation of mine. Never read it anyway. But it's just really weird that we are, as you rightly said, we've got this sort of like apparently vanilla president. But the interesting thing is like it's and I think it's going to change or not change or dictate also the outing of the sort of like the last weeks of Trump. Is that the Republicans still need Trump, and they need to try to milk him out as much as possible. Because let's not forget that the Republican Party has been decreasing for the last 30 years. It's a dying party. So all they are left, less and less and less and less and less and less. So all they are left, I'm talking about the popular vote, not the mechanics of the Senate and everything. So their battle is fully strategic. You know, it's only about that. They're not gonna get America back for a long time in that terms, right? In terms of enthusiasm, of vision. Now, that's not gonna happen. So they're left with this, and this is how they see at the moment Trump is like. First of all, is like, let's get him out softly, and also let's try to milk and get as much space we can in the Senate and everything. Let's try all the dynamics possible. I do think that one of the strategies is actually kind of agreeing to Biden rather than somebody else. And this is not a malicious thing. It's just, desire, come on, guys, let's not radicalize. Let's try a compromise on what we want. So at the end of the day, the two parties are right and more right. There's no left in America. So that's what I think. And I think we should look at what the Republicans want from Trump.
Sorry, go on.
I just wanted to go back to what Oliver said about Joe Biden, how he thought he might be more progressive than Kamala Harris. Very interesting idea. I'm not totally sure I agree with that, because I know Joe Biden is a centrist. I mean, he was behind a lot of the law and order stuff in the 90s. And like, for example, him and Mitch McConnell, even though, let's say Mitch McConnell wins the Senate, right? And people are saying, well, will he be able to do anything? And the thing is, him and Mitch McConnell know each other. They're good friends from when they were in the Senate. And like when Obama had difficulties, with the Senate, he would send Biden down to talk to Mitch McConnell. So, Biden, he's got his good points. He's a centrist. He wants to reach across the aisle. I think we need to step back. As much as I am a big lefty, I think we need some sort of partisan we got to get rid of this bipartisan shit, and we need to work together, kind of thing. And Kamala Harris also not exactly super liberal. She was behind the prosecution when she was in California. Art, you might know this because Kamala Harris was like the prosecutor of California or something like that. And she was behind the incarceration of a lot of African-American men, believe. She's not exactly super progressive, but my husband went and told me all these things that Kamala Harris is doing that I didn't know about. So I was like, oh, she's more progressive than I thought, kind of thing. But, at the end of the day, and Bernie Sanders, have you seen the Independent headline? Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are frozen out of the cabinet. Why? Because they're looking at the Senate races and they want to win them. And they think the Democratic Party is having some serious infighting at the moment between the progressive part and then the right part of the party, both blaming each other for what happened because they didn't have that sweeping blue wave that they wanted. And so and also Mitch McConnell, if Mitch McConnell is in charge of the Senate, he will want a very, he has to approve everybody that's in Joe's cabinet. So Joe might have wanted a more progressive cabinet, but if Mitch McConnell doesn't approve it, it's not going to happen, kind of thing. So to be honest with you, I'm not thrilled about Joe Biden. He wasn't it was more just kind of like, we have to pick this guy. Always these elections are like the lesser of two evils, right? And this time it really was a big fat evil and a centrist candidate. I was like, okay, I don't care. I like Joe. Yeah, all right, Joe. But I don't. Yeah, sorry, John, go ahead.
I would like to spend a bit more time about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, but because we don't have much time, I would like to get a tiny bit of, say, Art's idea about Kamala Harris and Biden before we move on to the last topic, which is how the UK is affected by the results of the US election. So, Art, do you have anything to say about Biden and Kamala Harris before we move on?
To be honest, I was one of those the Trump people in general. I mean, I have been surprised that Biden was. I saw a video someone had posted where Biden was stomping down, tearing the Senate floor because of apartheid, which I had never. I don't know if you've seen that.
No,
but he does have a. He's not total, you know, sellout right wing guy. He was really passionate when they were trying. They almost had to take him out of the Senate floor because he wasn't letting them, you know, support apartheid. Kamala Harris, yeah, a lot of, you know, yeah, putting brothers in prison for a bit of weed, you know. Maybe she's just doing her job. You know, I don't know much about him really. But there's one quick thing I'll say is that as far as getting a progressive appointees for his cabinet, if he appoints, I've heard that if he appoints Warren and particularly Warren and Sanders, gives them cabinet positions,
it's not.
that's two people out of the Senate that we would have had, and it doesn't work so smoothly that you just get another Democrat in the Senate. There might be it's a bit more complicated. So if Warren goes to the cabinet, she loses her Senate position, and we're even
Right, right. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, we must move on into the last topic. There will be links in the description box for articles that anybody here in this panel has thought that you might want to actually check out. My contribution will be one about Kamala Harris and how, well, she denied someone's ability to get surgery, somebody who was trans, when they were basically in a prison. And that's one of many things that I didn't know about yet, pretty heavy. So, but yeah, can we find out from you guys what you believe will be the outcome for the UK in terms of Trump no longer being in power in 2021? Let's start with Ollie. Anything from you? I'm sure you've got tons of things to say, so I thought I'd go there first.
Well, I guess with the impact for the UK, it's a strange one because obviously we're, you know, barreling headlong over a cliff on purpose for some reason, and we have. I think there was a lot of fear over Trump being the dodgy salesman and trying to force stuff down our throat and yada yada yada. To be honest, I don't think that's going to change. Much like Alfredo was saying about war, American business interests don't change. There is no conspiracy, it's just money. And so anything in that regard, and in terms of our position and our relationship with it, probably won't change all that much. I think if nothing else, though, it might give Britain a little leg up spiritually, because we've just had the same whole routine with Biden and with Starmer and Bernie and Corbyn. And so things like that, where we can see, okay, like we might be able to get rid of the populist fluffy haired idiot in favor of someone who's maybe a bit more bipartisan, a little bit more appealing. Maybe that would be good. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, I can't say I see much change other than just not having to wake up to the a-hole on the TV anymore. Sorry, moving on.
Sorry, can I just say, because I've been kind of having a few kind of conversations with people around this, and you know, all you know, a whole link between Trump and Brexit and all this kind of stuff, and you know, all this pressure put on, you know, the UK getting a trade deal with the US, you know, which from my limited understanding would contribute like, you know, a fraction to our GDP, like nothing in comparison to what Brexit's likely to cost us anyway. But I don't know, like there's this whole thing, you know, about us being sent to the back of the queue in terms of getting a trade deal, you know, if Biden is president instead of Trump. But I don't know, like I'd kind of rather be at, if not the back of the queue, somewhere near the back of the queue, knowing that the queue actually makes any sense, knowing that you can trust the queue and trust that at some point you're going to get there, you know, whereas with Trump, it's kind of, you know, who knows? Like it could be that, you know, a trade deal is agreed on, and then, you know, he sees something on Fox News and just like sets the whole thing on fire. It's just, you know, at least we know what we're kind of dealing with to a certain extent, and we can kind of maybe trust the words coming out of you know, out of Biden's mouth a bit more.
I don't know what actually is going to be the complication or no complication for England, but I just know one thing is that America always can bet on two horses, right? They have two ways they wanted to treat Iraq. There are two ways they want to treat Europe, and they can both implement a sort of like, you are the enemy, we want to dismantle you, or you are the friend, we want to protect you. They can play 2 games at the same time. England has got only 1 card. So whatever he played, they played the card. That's the difference.
Okay. There was an article, just to take it back to Biden's presidency, there was an article that explicitly showed, there was a quote from Biden, how he's not particularly a fan of Boris's Islamophobic comments. So I'd like to maybe shift the conversation to how they will get on in terms of their different approaches to leadership.
Can I interject? What happened to Rob? He's gone on my box.
Rob, oh yeah.
Rob did say that he won't be taking a phone call, so don't worry, he still exists.
Okay.
Rob still exists, everyone. He's still alive.
Okay.
Art, Ola,
Cool.
do you have anything to say about Biden's relationship to the UK, and particularly his relationship to our friend Boris, before we close the rant box today?
Oh, I'll say quickly that I saw an interview with Boris, and he was saying, "Oh, it's special relationship," and the girl said, "Yeah, you have heard that he's called you a clone, a Trump clone. Did you ever see that?"
Yes, but I would like to.
Referring to, yeah.
And another quick thing is, people said, "Oh, well, this is strange, because Biden doesn't." He said he doesn't like Brexit. He doesn't like Boris, and someone apparently close to the Biden camp said, "You think he hates Boris? You should hear Kamala talk about him."
Wow.
So those 2 things made me kind of soften to them, even though I don't know much about them.
I just want to say that, did you see the thing on Twitter where I think his name's Tommy Viento? Anyway, he's somebody close to the Biden campaign, and he tweeted, like, you shape-shifting creep about Boris. We haven't forgotten what you said about Obama in Kenya. He had basically, this is somebody who has worked with Obama, has worked with Biden. Okay. And yeah, he doesn't like Brexit. He's Irish. Let's not forget this. Joe Biden is Irish. He's not going to let that international law breaking thing gonna happen. He's gonna make sure that there's no deal for. I basically think what's gonna happen is, real quick, Boris is gonna have to court Europe now, because he can't do a no deal because of this, because Biden is in charge. Biden's not going to guarantee anything. That said, Biden will probably not take too much personally, because he is a seasoned politician, and where it is necessary, he will reach across the aisle again to miscreant, shape-shifting creep like Boris Johnson, if need be, for the good of things. But I don't think he's gonna, I don't think he's gonna be a fan. He's not gonna enable him like Trump enabled him with, putting out Britain first fucking tweets and whatever other nonsense that he did, kind of things. But he's not a fan, but he'll grin and bear it if he needs to. He's not going to be sitting there taking points.
Sure. As per usual, time has somehow disappeared like an evil genie that we thought we could trust. We've got to basically end the show, but if you want to say something about what it is you all do before going, now is the time. Ola, what do you do? Where can people find
One thing I want to do this to art, like Brady Bunch. Hi,
I never got the Brady Bunch in this country. We never had it, so
you never got it.
I'm sure your American friends are very happy now. Ola, what do you do? Where can people find you?
I host a radio show. It's good music, has no boundaries, anytime, any space, and just search Ola's Cool Kitchen. I'm on Mixcloud, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, and Instagram.
Awesome. Art, how about you? Where can people find you? What do you do?
I'm an artist and musician, artterry.co.uk. I have a show, Is Black Music, about alternative Black music and alternative Black culture on Resonance FM, 104.4 FM.
Fantastic.
Hey, yeah.
Al, what do you do?
I run Public Pressure. The address is publicpressure.org, and it's a subcultural music online magazine.
And you work for the devil. Let's not forget that. Talk to him about his air conditioning. I used to work for the devil. Terrible place of work. Ollie, what do you do? Where can we find you?
I'm a musician and a music producer, and usually you can find me somewhere around a studio called The Rake, but also through Barbarella's Bang Bang and a band called Dorja. So,
Fantastic, fantastic. Rob is no longer with us. I say that and it sounds rather ominous. He is with us, as in he is still living. But he is no longer on the show because he's had to take a phone call. I really will be so thankful to see you all again in some way, shape or form beyond the actual use of Zoom, because you're such fascinating people. Thank you for coming on to RantboxTV, which is basically uploading a new video every Friday. And if you want to know more, please go to the description box. It is all there. This has been wonderful. Have a happy post-Trump world. Bye-bye.
Yeah, all right. Okay, did you click the thing? Are we done?
I'm pressing stop right now.
Oh,
Goodbye.
shit.